Let's bring in ABC's Alex Presha, who's been outside the courthouse for the entirety of this trial, as well as ABC News contributor and managing partner at the Cochran firm, Channa Lloyd. Thanks both for being here. So, Alex, let me begin with you. We've talked about this today. That was quite a turn in this case. There's always a sense that the victim or the person who's been killed, the victim may be up to the jury, but could become the target. They aren't there to defend themselves, and there was Laura Hogue stepping right in and doing that.
That's right, Terry. And throughout this trial, I think the defense has walked a pretty fine line of explaining what happened that day in their words in a way that didn't victim blame. They've spoken, especially the Hogues and defense attorney Rubin and Sheffield, they've spoken very graciously about Ahmaud Arbery for the most part. And so today was a very noted turn in how defense attorney Hogue was describing Ahmaud Arbery, saying that there were two sets of decisions that were being made that day that ultimately led to his shooting and his killing, and that there were plenty of things that Ahmaud Arbery had done in the days and weeks and even months leading up to that February 23rd last year that ultimately caused his death. She talked about him entering these homes as if that was a felony that had been committed, and also suspiciously reaching into his waistband, giving Travis McMichael the idea that he might have a weapon on him. Now, we know that throughout this case and throughout this investigation, Ahmaud Arbery never had a weapon on him. Also, was never actually seen taking anything from that open construction site that belonged to Larry English, which we've seen the surveillance video of Ahmaud Arbery in that dwelling a couple of times, including on the day that he was shot. But still, defense attorney Hogue is zeroing in here, saying that, you know, these were part of the calculus, the totality of the circumstance by which Gregory and Travis McMichael thought that Ahmaud Arbery might be a threat. And certainly it was something that Wanda Cooper-Jones, Ahmaud Arbery's mother, found difficult listening to. You heard her, or we saw her at one point say wow and exit the courtroom whenever she was talking about, whenever Hogue was talking about those long, dirty toenails. And I imagine whenever the family comes out in the next few minutes, that's probably something that they or their representatives are going to speak about as well.
Absolutely, Alex. Thank you for that. And Channa, yeah, it was a remarkable day, closing arguments taking that turn. But we actually heard three closing arguments from the defense, one for each defendant. How do you think, in general, as you look at this defense, that these men were involved in a citizen's arrest, lawfully pursuing Ahmaud Arbery, and then acted in self-defense? How well do you think they managed to sum up the evidence that came in to bolster that case?
I mean, in this particular set of closings, what we really saw were appeals to individuals' emotions. It wasn't necessarily a heavy factual, other than Mr. Goff. It wasn't very factually based. I mean, the initial defense that was put on for Mr. Travis, where they spoke about him being a Coast Guard member and, you know, reach a helping hand to him like he's done in so many others, you know, instances in his past, that's an emotional appeal. I mean, even the defense of Mr. Greg McMichaels, when we heard her attacking the victim, you know, we hear that, but really let's think about the witnesses and the people of that community. They were extremely concerned that their community was changing, that they had all these suspicious persons in it. And even the young lady who posted the video did so on behalf of the Michaels because she thought it would be something to clarify them. So that was an appeal to the persons on the juries that may have similar feelings. But again, this trial must be decided on fact, and I think that tomorrow in the rebuttal, that's what we'll see. We'll see some of these emotional arguments chipped away at with the facts of the case and what actually happened. I'm really hoping to see her use the video tomorrow as well to reinforce some of those facts that you're going to see her chip away at these defense stories with.
And it's also, Channa, a matter of the law in this case. They're claiming they had the lawful right to pursue Ahmaud Arbery using the citizen's arrest law, which has now been repealed in Georgia. Earlier, we saw lead prosecutor Linda Donikowski argue that McMichael's claim of self-defense as part of that process. We were trying to arrest him, and then he attacked us. Let's listen to what the prosecutor in this case did with that argument.
You don't get a claim self-defense. If you're committing a felony against somebody, you don't get a claim self-defense. And the third one is if you provoke somebody so that they defend themselves against you, and then you go, oh, look, he attacked me first. But you really were the one who was provoking the attack on yourself. You don't get a claim self-defense.
So, Channa, there she is outlining some of the exceptions to the law of self-defense. And she also went through the citizen's arrest law, which requires, if you are a person in Georgia who wants to make a citizen arrest, you have to witness a felony. You don't just get to chase anybody, or you have to have an immediate knowledge of it. So she went after their defense on the law with the law. Do you think she got her point across?
I think she did get her point across. I think the point she wanted to make about, creating a danger and then claiming self-defense was very clear. I think her illustration and the way she walked through the citizen's arrest law was actually very on point. I think that it's really going to turn on whether or not this jury felt that they were justified in doing this citizen's arrest and whether or not they were even trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. I think that this is a older law that's been on the books, and it has a very dubious history. And most people will not seek, even if they see something happening, they may call 911, but the average citizen is not acting upon this law. And I think that's where this resorts constantly saying common sense. I think that's where you see that appeal coming in, where she says, you got to use your common sense. She's appealing to these jurors to say, okay, we understand what's being said, but let's just put this in a broader framework about what this case really is about.
That law, as you point out, Channa, does have this somewhat sordid history. It dates from the time of segregation and before as a tool that could be used against black citizens in Georgia. And that does raise, and sort of some of the arguments today, the specter that is in this case. In the public mind, for some people, as soon as they heard about it, was three white men jumping their pickups, and they chased down a black man in the neighborhood who was doing absolutely nothing wrong, and they kill him. The defense has tried to paint a very, very different picture. And I wonder how you think race is going to play for a jury. Obviously, we know how we all feel about this, one way or the other. But for a jury, as they hear the evidence and arguments, how do you think that specter of our awful, troubled racial history enters this case?
It's interesting. Whenever you're talking about jurors, we have to remember that they still view things through the lens at which they see life. Their experience through life is going to color. Each and every one of us is colored by our experience through life. And jurors are no different. They're going to take that in. They're going to look at the facts of this case, and they're going to make a decision. The judge is there to guide them with the law. That's why those jury instructions are so important, because that is going to guide all of the arguments and deliberations that they're having around this. And even if it's not voiced in the deliberation room, we all know that race is going to play some sort of factor in this. When jurors are able to look at persons that they are easily identifiable with, that they understand, they feel like they have some sort of common thread, it's a much easier challenge. And I think that's what we saw Ms. Ho try to illustrate, was that, here we have these neighbors, these witnesses that spoke a lot about feeling endangered in their community. And she was trying to set that rapport of identification with the jurors. These are people that look like their neighbors or people that are around them constantly. So whether or not they actually articulate it in the jury room, it will still be at the back of everyone's mind and still the lens by which they're looking at the information.
The burden of our history in this case, no question about it. And Channa, during Kevin Goff's closing arguments, he said his client, William Roddy Bryan Jr., he's the driver of the other pickup, the one that prosecutors allege cut off Ahmaud Arbery's path of escape. He followed Ahmaud Arbery because his lawyer says he was following his duty under God. It was an odd part of that closing argument, and I hadn't heard an argument like that. How unusual do you think that is? And does it go beyond the court, or does the closing arguments have wide latitude to bring up whatever the defense thinks might work?
There's wide latitude in closings because these are arguments. So he had the ability and he used it. It was a very interesting thing, especially because we all know that many people's lives have been lost due to religious crusades. So it's a very kind of interesting way he tried to play that out. And I think he tried to appeal towards any juror that may have some sort of, God-fearing bent or some sort of, affinity for feeling like they were led by God to do something. So I think he tried. I don't know that it's something I would have done in a closing, but Mr. Goff is definitely, if nothing else, unorthodox.
No question. Speaking of on Roddy Bryan's behalf, Kevin Goff also argued his client is not directly involved in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. This is really the heart of the defense for the other driver of the other pickup. So let's listen for a moment. Okay, we don't have that soundbite, but he basically said, my client, Roddy Bryan Jr., he didn't even know that those other guys had guns. He was just trying to help out. He saw the man run by. He saw his neighbors jump in their pickup truck. He's trying to do a good deed for his neighborhood. Don't rope him into this alleged murder. Don't rope him into those other defendants. How effective do you think that will be?
His particular argument was the best that I think he could make in an attempt to distance Mr. Bryan from the other co-defendants. The only thing with his particular argument, and I think the shortcoming for his particular case, is really that he didn't have any information, right? The lack of information cuts both ways. You may not have known that they were armed, yet you still got in a car and you still drove and attempted to cut someone off who was simply running through the neighborhood. So I think that's going to create a lot of issues when you're talking about the jury looking at his case, because he made no attempts to call 911. He wasn't yelling to other neighbors, call 911. He was in full-on go mode as he drove the car and was videoing. And I think those things are going to count against him when we're talking about jury deliberations.
Right. And he did reportedly seek, his lawyer sought a plea deal at the closing of the evidence here. They've denied that, but Ahmaud Arbery's mother has said she was told that by prosecutors. Now, Alex, you've been there in Brunswick for us since the beginning of this trial. What's the sentiment outside the courthouse and around town? How is this impacting that place where you've now spent a few weeks?
Well, Terry, I will say that for this Brunswick community, and we've had numerous discussions with people that actually live here, they've started to process the idea of what this community will have to deal with when a verdict comes through, regardless of what that verdict is. But the acceptance of that verdict is going to be that first stage, but then also the rebuilding and the healing process that comes after that. Because again, you keep in mind, this is a relatively small community. Remember, we talked about this a lot even during the jury selection, right? Because there were so many potential jurors who got dismissed because they either knew the McMichaels, Roddy Bryan, or the Arbery family. It's a very, very tight-knit community. And so there is going to be some reconciliation and some healing that has to happen. And so we've heard that from specifically a lot of faith leaders here. But the other thing that I will say is, look, today it's a much different energy here, right? And so last Thursday, when we had these hundreds of faith leaders in town, and they had prayer circles and fellowshipped over food, and we even saw professional athletes. There was Adam Wainwright, who's from Brunswick, star pitcher in Major League Baseball, who was here, along with Davis Love, also here. Today, it's very different. It's a little bit younger of a crowd. It's a militant bunch. We've seen new Black Panther Party members carrying rifles around. You heard that march around the courthouse earlier today, which the judge was reacting to at the very end of court today. This was a different energy, and so I think it's going to be interesting to watch as we get closer and closer to deliberations, who actually comes around this courthouse and what energy really kind of takes over here.
It's just a remarkable picture there. We were just looking at it, Alex, of the new Black Panther members with their long guns, the defense lawyers. They were all agreeing, for sure, you're welcome here with your guns. It is a very different place. It's a public courthouse. Everybody can show up. And in America in the 21st century, a lot of people show up with their guns. ABC's Alex Presha.
It's also Georgia.
And Georgia, thank you. Yes, indeed, that's true as well. And managing partner at the Cochran law firm, Channa Lloyd. Thanks very much for being with us.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.